So why would a 922-page conservative blueprint, one designed to fundamentally reshape the federal government, hinge so much on aggressively expanding presidential power and lean so heavily on constitutional law wins?
Well, because the fundamental premise, really, of this document, Project 2025, is that winning an election is just the first step.
Right.
The immediate challenge, according to these sources,
Hmm.
is facing a government bureaucracy, often called the deep state in this context, that's inherently resistant to the kind of change they want to implement.
Ah, okay.
So our deep dive shows this whole agenda. It isn't just about policy papers. It demands actual control over the entire executive branch to even have a chance of working.
So the mission isn't just writing new rules, it's figuring out how to actually make the federal machinery, EPA, Commerce, all of it, comply right away. And
Exactly.
that means tackling potential resistance from what? Tens of thousands of career civil servants, people who might just fundamentally disagree with the direction?
That's precisely the challenge highlighted. And the key they see to unlocking that control is legal. There's this significant push, backed by conservative legal thinkers, arguing the president must have the clear power to remove agency heads and, well, align the bureaucracy politically.
And we've seen hints of this playing out.
We have. Look at the recent Supreme Court action, granting that stay in the case involving the former FTC member, Rebecca Slaughter.
Does seem like a big deal.
It's huge because it legally strengthens the argument that the president can remove leaders even from so-called independent agencies, especially if they exercise executive authority.
Okay, so that legal groundwork, it sets the stage for what sounds like the most disruptive part of P2025, bringing back Schedule F. For listeners who might not recall that, what does reviving Schedule F mean in practical terms?
It's basically the enforcement mechanism for compliance. Right now, most federal workers are under merit system rules. Professionals, hard to fire for purely political reasons.
Standard civil service protections.
Right. Schedule F, created by executive order in 2020, then pulled back, would essentially reclassify potentially tens of thousands of these roles key policy jobs, high-level professional positions, moving them out of that merit system
To what?
to at-will status, like political appointees.
Which means?
It means if someone in one of those roles is seen as resisting the elected agenda, they could be fired immediately and replaced by someone who is aligned.
Wow.
P2025 advocates argue that without this power, without the ability to clear out what they see as internal resistance and put loyalists in key spots, the whole reform plan gets bogged down, neutralized, before it even gets off the ground.
Okay, let's unpack the why behind all this. This document, the mandate for leadership, it's clearly more than just policy tweaks or budget ideas. What's the core philosophy driving the Project 2025 authors?
Yeah, the sources don't mince words. They essentially view the current federal government as broken, fundamentally broken. The document itself calls the government a behemoth, one that's been weaponized against American citizens and conservative values. It talks about suffering from what they term the long march of cultural Marxism.
So the perspective isn't just inefficiency, it's that the government has actually turned against the principles they hold dear.
Precisely. The plan revolves around basically four big aims: restoring the family unit, dismantling this administrative state, the bureaucracy we've been talking about, defending borders and national sovereignty, and securing what they term God-given individual rights to live freely.
And they're quite explicit about this.
Very explicit. The goal stated is to systematically redirect the entire federal government towards these foundational conservative principles.
And it seems they're not shying away from the moral or cultural dimensions either. I mean, the architects mention economic issues like inflation ravaging family budgets, sure, but also things like drug overdoses and, quote, the toxic normalization of transgenderism in schools.
Absolutely. That cultural element is woven throughout. The plan openly talks about needing to infuse Christian nationalism into every aspect of the federal government.
So policy changes aren't just about the economy for them.
No, not at all. For P2025 proponents, it's about restoring what they see as America's lost moral foundation.
Yeah.
And they view the bureaucracy as a key channel for promoting cultural trends they oppose. Therefore, that bureaucracy must be transformed.
Okay, if the government is seen as weaponized, let's talk specifics. Which agencies are in the crosshairs first? Moving from the philosophy to the actual policy targets, maybe starting with economics and finance.
Right. The proposals here are pretty sweeping. On the fiscal side, The ultimate dream goal is replacing the income tax entirely with a consumption tax, like a national sales tax.
Eventually.
Eventually, yes. But in the immediate term, they want to extend the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act.
And what about individual income taxes right away? Any changes proposed there?
Yeah, they recommend simplifying things down to just 2 flat rates. A 15% rate for incomes up to around $168,600, and then 30% for everything above that.
And corporations.
They also propose a significant cut there, too, dropping the corporate tax rate from 21% down to 18%. It's pretty clear philosophy. Broad tax reductions aimed at boosting the economy.
And beyond taxes, what does dismantling the administrative state actually look like in terms of agencies?
It means some major restructuring and even outright abolition for some. The plan recommends getting rid of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the CFPB,
Okay.
also eliminating the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC, which handles a lot of antitrust enforcement, and shrinking the National Labor Relations Board. The overall idea seems to be reducing the federal regulatory footprint on business.
And you mentioned something interesting about data agencies, merging the Census Bureau, Bureau of Economic Analysis, Bureau of Labor Statistics. Why consolidate those?
Yeah, that's a fascinating structural proposal, putting the measurement of nearly all key economic data, inflation, jobs, growth stats under one roof.
Which would be politically aligned.
Well, that's the potential effect. The sources argue it creates efficiency, but practically speaking, it could ensure the basic numbers the government uses to, define economic reality are generated within an organization aligned with the administration's outlook. It centralizes that statistical power.
Right, I see. Okay, let's shift to regulatory rollbacks. Climate policy seems like a major area where the current bureaucracy and the P2025 philosophy are, shall we say, fundamentally opposed.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
This is where the goals get really aggressive. The plan proposes just abandoning strategies to cut greenhouse gas emissions, period.
Just stop.
Stop. The advice is for the president to essentially eradicate climate change references from absolutely everywhere in government documents, programs, you name it. And the big target for elimination here is NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration.
Abolish NOAA entirely. Why NOAA specifically?
Because, and this is a direct quote from the P2025 materials, they call NOAA one of the main drivers of the climate change alarm industry. So for the authors, climate science isn't treated as neutral ground. It's seen as an ideology, one that needs to be systematically removed from the federal government's structure and mission.
That certainly underlines the perceived urgency for overhauling regulations. Okay, moving to borders, national sovereignty. The sources talk about an immigration enforcement operation on a scale we haven't really seen.
The scale described is, vast. Key figures involved use the analogy of building the Panama Canal to describe the complexity and resources needed. It's envisioned as comprehensive, immediate.
And what kind of tactics are we talking about?
The mandate includes arresting, detaining, and removing immigration violators anywhere in the United States. To pull this off, the plan suggests possibly deputizing local police, maybe even National Guard units, particularly in states that might not cooperate fully.
Using state and local forces for federal immigration enforcement.
Potentially, yes. Alongside, of course, significantly more funding for the border wall. It's really an assertion of federal power overriding state or local objections in this area.
Which brings us right back to the legal side. We've laid out these, frankly, revolutionary policy goals, but none of it happens if the administration is constantly tied up in court or facing internal roadblocks, right? This seems to be why the legal strategy around the executive branch itself is so critical to P2025.
Absolutely. The power play is personnel. It all comes down to controlling the people who implement policy, and that relies on a specific constitutional interpretation, the Unitary Executive Theory.
Can you break that down simply? What is the Unitary Executive Theory in practice?
Basically, it argues the president is the ultimate boss of the entire executive branch. Everyone working within it ultimately serves at his discretion.
Based
Primarily on Article 2 of the Constitution. The clause saying the executive power shall be vested in a president, and also the duty to take care that the laws be faithfully executed. Proponents argue that to actually fulfill that duty, the president must have the power to hire and, crucially, fire subordinates without undue restriction. If he can't remove people, they argue, he can't be held accountable, and his constitutional power is essentially meaningless.
That sounds like it runs directly counter to the whole idea of independent agencies, doesn't it? Like the FTC.
It's a direct challenge, yes. Specifically to the 1935 Supreme Court case, Humphrey's Executor. That ruling was key because it established that Congress could set up agencies, like the FTC then, with some insulation from direct presidential firing, give them a measure of independence.
So why do P-2025 thinkers believe that nearly 90-year-old precedent is wrong, or at least outdated, today?
The argument is that modern agencies, like today's FTC or the CPSC, wield far more actual executive power-making rules, enforcing them, imposing penalties, than the agencies back in the 1930s did.
So more power means?
It means, according to this legal view, that if an agency is truly exercising significant executive power now, then the president, who holds all constitutional executive power, must be fully in charge. Any limits Congress put on his ability to fire the heads of such agencies are therefore unconstitutional intrusions.
And that recent Supreme Court action in the FTC case you mentioned, the Slaughter case, that seems like real-world evidence the court might be receptive to this argument.
It certainly offers tangible evidence, yes. The court granting a stay, allowing the president's removal of the FTC member while the case proceeds, that signals at least some judicial sympathy for the unitary executive viewpoint.
What was the court's reasoning in the stay?
Well, the note accompanying this stay was quite telling. It mentioned the government faces greater risk of harm from an order allowing a removed officer to continue exercising the executive power.
That sounds like the court acknowledging the practical problem of a president being unable to control their own administration.
It's a powerful signal, suggesting the judiciary understands the political paralysis that can happen when a president feels they can't manage their own branch effectively.
And interestingly, the P-2025 source material itself seems to use past resistance to bolster this argument for consolidation. They actually list, over 90 federal court injunctions that blocked the previous administration's actions early on?
That's right, it's in the appendix. They point to that history of judicial blocks and internal resistance as proof positive that the president needs immediate, unquestioned control over the executive bureaucracy from day one. Otherwise, they argue, the entire mandate gets stalled or watered down by lawsuits and bureaucratic foot-dragging.
So it shows the plan isn't just wishful thinking. It anticipates the fight. Project 2025 seems like this two-pronged attack. Hundreds of specific policy changes built on top of a very sophisticated legal strategy aimed at maximizing presidential authority right out of the gate.
Exactly. It's a comprehensive approach. Detailed policy combined with a legal framework designed to ensure that policy can actually be implemented rapidly.
So this deep dive really highlights this simultaneous massive push on both policy specifics, the P-2025 document, and fundamental constitutional law regarding presidential power. The scale of ambition here is just enormous.
It really is.
Which leads to maybe a final thought for our listeners. If the stated goal of the P-2025 architects is to restore accountability, maybe reduce some of the public's cynicism about government effectiveness, how fast does a president need to assert this kind of control over the bureaucracy, even if it means overturning decades of precedent, before the whole reform agenda just gets ground down by internal opposition and endless court battles?